In this video, we're going to be talking about the boarding workflow. It's going to be a 4-step process, essentially, where we're going to create a reservation and we're going to check that reservation in, go through the invoice and the checkout, collect payment. And we have a separate video for the boarding room setup. We're going to focus on workflow in this one. We're looking at the main schedule right now, and I'm just going to click on this boarding tab and view the reservation list here. And you can see we have a calendar with a bunch of rooms in alphabetical order. Just to get familiar with the appointments here, we can see that if I click on day, I can jump to a specific day right here. And then I'll see an hourly by hourly. The red line is the current time of day. And this updates in real time such that you don't have to click refresh. And if some other user is trying to create a reservation, I could actually see that that's tentatively blocked there so I don't accidentally double book. I can book in this one, for example, up to 2 people, rather 2 guests. And you'll notice here, I can scroll left to right, and that's useful on an iPad or another tablet. You can also have a little tip down here. If you're on a typical laptop or computer for horizontal scrolling, you can hold shift and scroll your mouse back and forth. I can also see the entire week up here to get a different view. That might be helpful. Or I can jump to specific back and forth, or to a custom filter here. If I just want to see, let's say 3 days or a couple of days, I can do that and then apply that there. So let me just reload this here to start over. I do want to click on the reservation, and let's make the first step here where I create the reservation. I'm going to create a reservation on this cat condo here for today. And I'll search for my client by name or phone number. I can also add a brand new client if they're on the phone and they're not in my database yet. I can just create a profile right there. Similarly, I can just have the patient already associated or create a brand new patient right there. And I can reassign this check-in and checkout date. If I want, I can put them for a couple of days there. And the way it works in the logic is like a hotel room, really. So just like you would check in after a certain time, you could check out an overnight the next day. And those times for check-in and check-out are set in the actual boarding add-on. If I were to check out later than that time, the checkout time, it would actually add another charge. Here we see a shortcut to do a split. So what that means is, let's say over this 2-day reservation, I think that this patient, this guest should be in a particular room or kennel or cage or something, but I want to assign them to a different kennel or condo or room for part of that reservation. Maybe because I'm looking ahead, I'm seeing that their family is being separated, they do well in some situation, something like that. So I can split that right at the time that I create the reservation. I'm just going to do a standard here. If I click next here, I'll have a chance to update the information here for the client profile and also make sure they're opted in for a reminder. The confirmation is a message that has a default that can go out as soon as I save that reservation. It goes out and I can edit that. The reminder is another default message, and I can set that to go out before the actual reservation by some matter of days there. So that's creating the reservation. I've saved that. And you'll notice here, it's on this date right here. It's going to be blue when I've created that reservation. It'll change colors when I check in. So let's do that part. So they've shown up, and I'm going to click that here on the actual reservation, and I can check in from there. However, let's check out something else that's pretty cool. On the boarding, I can have a different view open. I like to keep this open all the time if I have a high volume boarding clinic. So I'm going to view that dashboard in a separate tab. And you'll notice here that on this current day, I have a workflow. It's called a Kanban board, really, that I can see who's going to be checking in that day based on that. And then from there, I can easily do a workflow. So from here, I can click on that and I can check in from there as well. I also have links to the files for the client and the patient. Let's go ahead and check in this reservation. At this point, usually I would create a new invoice, but if I have previously open invoices, I could use those as well. I have a default form here that's pulling from a letter template that we've talked about in a different video. So I don't have to change that here. Just has some questions on there that I'm going to want to print out. I have a default rate as well, also from the setup video where the room has a default rate. And that might be fine. In some cases, you might have a model where you charge differently based on if they're a second guest in the same condo, if they're part of the same family, maybe, and maybe you have a reduced rate for that. Or maybe you charge based on the guest weight. So what I can do here, if I don't want the default, I can just delete that, click there to delete that. And then I can just search for my other rate here and then select one of those. So you do have flexibility there. I'm just going to keep the default in this case. And you can have a special medical note template just for boarding situations or other scenarios. You might not necessarily need to create that, but if you want to take notes, it's good to have a template to do that and have that populate there for you. And you can also add bundles here, which is nice if you have a lot of charges you're expecting to put on the invoice all at once. And then some other things. I might want to print a cage card as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click save and check in that reservation. Okay, and you'll notice on my dashboard, it's changed here to this column currently boarded. So now it's sitting there. So I can get a view of what's going on. And again, if I were to go to my my reservation list here, just reload this. You'll notice that this reservation right here is green now. That means it's checked in. And then I have some other options at the bottom here. So again, split is to move them to a different room. And I, of course, have checkout, extend stay, and undo what I just did if I have the permission to do so. I also now have some nice links to the invoice that was created and that letter or that boarding form that was created by default there. I'm going to go ahead and switch back to my normal workflow page here. If I were to click on that, I'd see those options as well. So you might have your process from there on out to go to the invoice. And then just like any other typical invoice, you can click to add items and bundles there and go through that process. Now, I'm not going to collect the payment yet when they're ready to check out. So I'm going to go and skip to the checkout right now. And by the way, here's that boarding form based on the template, but I'm going to go and skip to the checkout, which I can do from here again, or I can do from my nice little dashboard. I'll click on here to check out. And notice here that the time was for 2 nights. The reason I want to check out before collecting payment is going back to the idea of a recalculation based on the true stay. In other words, if they're checking out early, the invoice will automatically recalculate based on the rate. If they're checking out late after the assigned day of the reservation, it will recalculate again. So I want to check out first. And you'll notice that when I created the invoice from the actual check-in process, it already assumes it's going to be the correct number of days based on the reservation. But that might change because things happen. So let's do the checkout. and see what happens. I'll click checkout on here. And the default is just the current day and time for me, which that happens to be as for this recording time. So that's actually going to be early. Now the reservation was till the 24th. I'm going to actually just pretend it's the 23rd and make it early in the morning. So probably before even the checkout time in my settings. I can put some notes there. So let's see what happens. Okay, so that moves from there down to this column here, checking out. So that's on there. And let's review the invoice now. This is the final step. And you'll notice what happened. The invoice recalculated for me because of my rules for check-in and check-out based on my settings there. And they checked out early, a day early. So it recalculated for me. This is why I want to take the payment after checkout. So on that invoice that I navigated to right from that board, I can go to the payments tab after I review it with the client. I could also export that by SMS or email. If you have integrated payments, they could actually pay online from their phone, or if you have pet care, they can pay from the pet care app as well. But I could go ahead and just process a new payment here. It'll look through the invoices and available credits and so forth, and then go through that normal payment process. So more or less, that's the workflow typical for boarding end to end right there.